From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Leading the news this week in Alabama government and politics is yet another arrest of a state lawmaker. State Representative Kelvin Lawrence of Hayneville was arrested on felony forgery charges. The indictment from Attorney General Steve Marshall alleges that Lawrence falsely made, completed, or altered a builder's license. These offenses are Class C felonies and punishable by 1 to 10 years in prison. Lawrence has declined to comment so far. House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter said in a statement that he expects members of the House to hold themselves to the highest standard of integrity in both their personal and professional lives. He added that he respects the criminal justice system to play out. Some breaking news that just came in this afternoon. Alabama has been awarded a $550 million grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to go toward the Mobile Bayway and Bridge project. U.S. Senator Katie Britt, who sits on the Senate Appropriations Committee, announced the grant on Friday after playing the leading role in pushing for the grant. She said the investment is a huge win for Alabama and anyone who drives along Interstate 10. Governor Kay Ivey said this federal investment is a game changer for the state's plans to complete the Mobile Bridge and Bayway project. Officials from the Alabama Department of Transportation say this funding, along with a loan they are pursuing, will allow the project to finally move forward. More good economic news for Alabama. The state moved up 20 spots in CNBC's latest rankings for top states for business. According to their latest study, CNBC rated Alabama as the most improved state for business in 2024. The state is now ranked 24th, up from 44th last year. The network cited Alabama's population growth, thriving tech industry, and the focus on improving workforce development as key factors in Alabama's ascent in the rankings. You'll remember this past legislative session, lawmakers passed and Governor Ivey signed into law a 6-bill package aimed at improving the state's workforce development model and removing barriers to allow more people to join the workforce. The State Board of Education met this week and heard from State Superintendent Eric Mackey, who shared the state's latest test scores. Preliminary data from the Alabama Comprehensive Assessment Program, better known as ALCAP, showed some promising gains made in reading, but some declines in math that Mackey characterized as disturbing. First, on English language arts, which includes reading, the percentage of students testing at or above proficiency increased at every level from 2nd to 8th grade. As you can see, the percentage of second graders proficient in ELA went from 54% last year to 59% this year. Big gains also made at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade levels. Not so much on the subject of math, though. Proficiency actually decreased in grades 2 through 5, but increased slightly at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. Mackey told the board that he and his team are especially concerned about the math scores and want to dig deeper to understand the nature of the problem.
We are going to do, just so you know, in the August State Board work session, we are planning to do a full update on the summer reading programs. And so we should know by then not only what enrollment was, but also participation and even the pass rate for the summer exam.
For a deeper dive on those education scores, check out our Spotlight on Education episode that aired this week. You can find it online at aptv.org or on our YouTube channel. We reported last week on the Department of Education being the target of a cyber attack. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott has a follow-up story looking into what that data breach means.
A week has passed since the Alabama Department of Education announced it was the victim of a cyber attack. The investigation is moving forward, and the goal is to keep one of the state's largest agencies safe from further attacks.
A hacker was able to get through a vulnerability. We've identified that vulnerability. It's been closed. Was not an open door, though. That's the very interesting thing. The way the agents have explained it to me, they said, look, if you leave a door open, that's on you. But in this case, you had the doors all locked, the windows all locked, but they stood at the door and with a battering ram until they broke the door down.
State Superintendent Dr. Eric Mackey says new details show cybersecurity tools already in place help protect vital data.
There are even more opportunities now for higher and better cybersecurity. Unfortunately, the cyber hackers also have ability to get those technologies. So we think that even as we build stronger walls to keep them out, we feel really good about where we are now, but we know that in time they will also build stronger hacks. And so it's a continuing cycle.
Dr. Eric Mackey says the investigation continues, but while it does, people are communicating from every corner of the state, gathering information to make sure new practices and new techniques are put in place to keep one of the state's largest agencies from being hacked again.
And I would tell you, just as a safe precaution for teachers, for anybody who has worked for the State Department of Education or local education agencies, and for those parents of students, I would go ahead and be monitoring the credit information. We don't have any details right now, though, about what will happen going forward.
Giving school officials and citizens more confidence in schools' cybersecurity.
It's really a sad time that these criminals are not just attacking private businesses, which would be heinous enough, but they are attacking vital public services, and we just got to continue to fight against them.
In Montgomery, Randy Scott, Capital Journal.
The Medical Cannabis Commission met this week here in the State House. There was little for the commission to do beyond housekeeping measures, as the medical marijuana licensing process is still being held up by litigation. Board Chair Rex Vaughn offered an update.
As long as litigation is going on, we'll have to work within the circuit court's demands. We feel like we've done that. Once again, I'll say that the commission has been transparent on everything that we have done. So I know at times we've been accused of having some backdoor dealings under the table, but it's been none of that, none whatsoever. The commission has not met on the side, behind closed doors, and done anything illegal. Really, Michael, it's going to come down to is the circuit court, possibly the civil appeals court, deciding that they've heard enough and they understand that things are like we have presented, like the commission has presented. We believe we are sound in our judgment, the way we have awarded licenses, and we believe that those awarded should be issued.
Alabama is known for its diverse and extensive waterways. Our lakes and rivers are also major tourism opportunities, especially in rural areas. A new project is aiming to bring more tourism to West Alabama. Capital Journal's Jeff Sanders has that story.
For years, the city marina in Selma was not a welcome sight for boaters trying to launch their vessels into the Alabama River.
With this boat landing here in Selma, Alabama, that for a good while, you couldn't get a boat in or out because of siltation.
Tim Gothard is with the Alabama Wildlife Federation. The need to increase access to the river sparked a plan that led to the development of an improved city marina. The marina is expected to serve as a catalyst for future economic growth.
The group got together and said, let's get that fixed. Let's add new boat docks. And when that happened, the Alabama Wildlife Federation, Alabama Power Company, Alabama RC&D and Bass said, let's get together and let's put in fishing pavilion here in conjunction with that new renovation of the landing.
The Alabama River, stretching from here in Montgomery all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, is a major attraction for sports fishing. And one of the goals of the new marina in Selma is to bring more sports fishing tournaments to the Black Belt.
You've got the bait now. So for all those fishermen and fisherwomen that are in high school and other tournaments and things, you can now compete and you can add. And when you bring those tournaments, high school, they bring their mamas and their daddies and everybody. So this is a great economic development.
Selma has done more for the rest of the world than we have been able to do for ourselves. We would not have been able to get this done alone. Thank you for bringing us all together to make this happen. And I say for all of our success, all of the challenges that we have experienced, and all the blessings along the way, I say to God be the glory.
This is a gateway to other places right here in the Selma area where the history of the Black Belt can be accessed starting at a place just like this.
Officials say plans for further improvements to marinas along the river are already underway. Reporting for Capital Journal, I'm Jeff Sanders.
We reported last week on the first arrests being made under a new Alabama law cracking down on fentanyl trafficking. State Representative Chris Pringle sponsored that new law, and I caught up with him this week in the State House. Representative Pringle, it was notable last week when the first arrests were made under the new law, essentially cracking down on fentanyl trafficking and really putting some teeth into that law to deter it. Talk about, you were involved in that law, you and Mr. Simpson. Are you satisfied with how it worked?
Representative Simpson are just thrilled. I mean, his bill was enhanced sentencing for distribution. My bill was manslaughter if you sell and your product kills somebody. So they work together, but they're not exactly the same. Okay. They're two separate bills. Mine is manslaughter if you sell a drug to somebody laced with fentanyl and it kills them.
And that's what happened in this tragic Baldwin County case, right? You had a girl who had an overdose, died from a fentanyl overdose, and they caught the drug dealers essentially, right? They
arrested 4 of them, but I just found out a few minutes ago 2 of them have been rearrested for the same charge. They killed somebody else.
So another death and another manslaughter charge potentially.
Exactly. And I understand there might be one up in Madison County also.
So, when it comes to sentencing laws, those are always controversial topics in the legislature. So do you think that this result, and of course these are just arrests, they haven't been convicted yet, do you think that this result is proof positive of what y'all are trying to do in terms of cracking down on fentanyl?
Exactly. I mean, last year we had like over 1,500 deaths in this state alone off fentanyl. And this bill will hopefully go a long ways to getting these career drug dealers off the streets. I mean, it's as crazy as this sounds. If New York found this out the hard way, somebody died of an overdose, and the police put a picture of the dead person and the actual heroin. And the heroin, they mark their heroin. They color code it, or they somehow establish a product. And when they put that picture out, people were coming from all over the place in New York City to that area of town to buy that drug because it was the strongest drug on the market. They thought, well, it killed him, but I can survive it. Drug addicts want the most powerful drug they can get. And drug dealers know this, so they add fentanyl. If they're not selling enough, they'll add fentanyl to their cocaine or their heroin or their meth in order to kill somebody because that will increase their sales.
That's crazy, yeah, because, conventional wisdom would think, well, a drug dealer would never want their customers to die because they lose a customer. But in this case, I think you're right. There's been some research showing that a death proves how potent their supply is, and thus is an advertisement, which is just perverse. What else can be done? We have a session coming up next year. What else can be done to crack down on the fentanyl problem?
Well, let's go back. I mean, this problem was created when we were prescribing opioids, and we created a huge demand for opioids in the population. This is what happened to my friend. He had surgery. He was given prescription opioids, got addicted to them, and then we closed the gap and quit prescribing these opioids and taking them off the market. But the demand was still there. And the Chinese know this, and they're sending fentanyl to Mexico. And with our open border policy, these drug cartels are just bringing this across the southern border because it's open. And there's nothing I can do about the southern border. That's a Washington problem. But I can tell the drug dealers, and we can tell the drug dealers as a state, you bring that garbage into our state and you start killing our friends and family, we're going to put you away for a long time.
Well, in this instance, that's exactly what appears to be happening. We're out of time, but thank you, Mr. Pringle.
Thank you.
Coming up next on the interview portion of the show, I'll speak with Congressman Dale Strong of Huntsville, also Department of Mental Health Commissioner Kim Boswell, and Nancy Dennis of the Alabama Retail Association, and also Hunter McDonald of the Locker Room here in Montgomery. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is Congressman Dale Strong from Huntsville. Congressman, thanks for coming on the show.
Todd, it's great to be with you.
Well, I know it's been a very busy week in Washington, a very interesting week in Washington. I want to get to all of it, but the main piece of legislation that y'all passed in the House of Representatives this week is called the SAVE Act, has to do with making it a crime for someone not a citizen of this country to vote. It passed the House, but obviously along partisan lines mostly.
Well, I'll tell you this right here. We've even had a couple of Democrats that joined us. But I'll be honest with you, what blows my mind is 198 of the Democrats, they voted to let any illegal vote in our elections. This is totally unacceptable. And I'll be honest with you, I'm excited about what I hope happens on January the 15th, and that's swearing in Donald Trump as the next president, because what I want to do is to go even further. Let's put those that voted illegally on the fast train to send them back to the country of their origin. But I can tell you this right here, under no circumstances should a non-U.S. citizen ever vote in an American election.
Your colleagues, your Democratic colleagues on the other side of the aisle argued that, look, it's already illegal for a non-citizen to participate in our election process. You know, and this is really just more of a messaging bill, and even could discourage people to vote in general. How do you respond to their arguments?
Well, I'll respond to their arguments by saying the first thing these illegals did was cross into our country illegally and give the middle finger to the American people. We have a constitution. We have borders. They talk about 10 million has crossed the border. I agree with Donald Trump. I believe we're closer to 15 million. And if you look, many of these people are not coming for jobs. They're coming for jihad. I'm telling you, like I see it, the information I've got. And so that's what I believe they're coming here for. We've got to stop it. It's easy to do. We saw what happened under Donald Trump. Keep ICE air rolling, process them, and send them back immediately to the country of their origin. What this administration has done is said, let's give them a free pass and tell them to come back for a court date some 3 years down the road. Our country is under attack. This is orchestrated, and this Biden administration created this problem.
I'll switch gears to talk about something that your committee, your House Armed Services Committee, is very much involved in. That's the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. This is an annually passed bill that really sets policy and spending measures for the Pentagon. It used to not be very controversial, right? I think it's 60-something years this has passed without fail. Came close last year, right, up into December. I know the House has passed its version of the bill. Senate, maybe you're still waiting on the Senate. What are the prospects this year? Is it going to be another grind at the very end to try to get over the finish line, or can there be some agreement on the NDAA?
But let me tell you something. We are solving a lot of problems in this National Defense Authorization Act, and it's working. You start looking at many of the things there are enlisted. We're trying to get a pay raise for them. They qualify for food stamps. That's unacceptable. The junior enlistedman warfighter qualifies for food stamps. And then the president goes and says, well, I think we ought to have a $15 minimal hourly pay. Well, even with this increased salary, they're still under $15. So he's already said that he'll veto it, but we're going to check his oil. My hope is the Senate will take it up. Their version is about $919 billion. But I'm telling you right now, we're trying to make living conditions better. We're trying to load our clip. A lot of people hear me say that, but we've got to have a full clip that if we're ever challenged, that we've got the ability to take care of business.
Well, yeah, you mentioned, I mean, it is a dangerous world. Lots going on in Ukraine right now in terms of the Russian conflict there, the war. But I remember you voted against that latest funding for, kind of arming Ukraine. Is that going to be your posture going forward, or can you see some support from whether it's Trump or the Republican Congress of continuing to fund that the Ukrainians' defense, or is it kind of a no-go if the Republicans win?
It's a great question, but what I did is for 8 months, we were told that we're going to solve this southern border issue and put it in the Ukraine bill. $60 billion for Ukraine, and after 8 months, zero for the southern border of America. Immediately, I said, there's no way that I will commit to this. North of 10 million people crossing into our country, killing American citizens, raping and taking children hostage, selling them in our country. Let me tell you this right here. America's got to be first. I support our allies. I'm thankful that Ukraine has fought like hell to beat Russia. But I'll tell you this right here. It's time that Europe gets more involved. It's time that Poland gets involved. America cannot fund every war in this country. And Ukraine has fought valiantly. America has done its part. But let me tell you something. The southern border of America is my #1 priority. And until we solve that, we'll see where this goes. But I'll promise you, I couldn't vote for $60 billion to Ukraine when we've got border security fighting at the southern border to keep these illegals out, along with 300 reservists from Alabama. And I thank the governor for sending them to Texas to help Governor Abbott, and it's been successful. And then you've got the Supreme Court and the president trying to sue Texas. I'm going to fight for Texas every day. I'm going to fight for the southern border, and Ukraine is definitely going to be second in my view.
I want to get to the politics, but before we do, because I know it's been a very interesting week in Washington, but I'm curious where we are with Space Command. You know, we've had this back and forth, the whole Colorado decision. You really had an interesting committee meeting, oversight hearing on House Armed Services dealing with Space Command. But where are we? Are we any closer to having a final decision or clarity about what is actually going to happen with Space Command?
I'll tell you, immediately after I was sworn into Congress and I get on the House Armed Services Committee, it was wonderful to be able to subpoena and bring in the Secretary of the Air Force, 4-Star General Dickinson, that is in Colorado. Dickinson met with the entire Alabama delegation, all 7 members of the House, both senators, 2 weeks prior to this announcement. And he said he could recommend nothing less than Redstone Arsenal to be the home of Space Command. The next thing we know, a couple of weeks later, he goes to the president and says he recommends Colorado. There was a 21 category process to determine what was best for national security, not what's best for elections, not what's best for this group or that group, to do what's right for national security. And that was my objective. The details showed that there was a close competition between #1 and #2. #1 being Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. #2 being New Mexico. Then the note said a large separation between 2 and 3. Well, can you imagine recommending the 5th competitor, the 5th most qualified? That was Colorado. We started going through that, and when I questioned the 4-Star General, I said, would you recommend the 5th most qualified vendor for bulletproof vests for the U.S. warfighter? He said, absolutely not. I said, would you recommend the 5th most qualified to build the F-35 fighter jet? He said, absolutely not. I said, can you tell the American people why you recommended the 5th most qualified for Space Command? He turned a pasty white and couldn't even put a sentence together. You look at the process. The law says that the Secretary of the Air Force makes the decision, and in that committee, I asked Secretary Kendall, can you tell me who you recommended for Space Command? He said, I recommended Huntsville, Alabama, Redstone Arsenal, because it is best for national security. And that's what I'm going to fight for. I want to do what's best for national security. We've got an IG investigation going right now. I formally requested that to determine if there was interference or any other interference from any point. I feel confident it was interference, and what I'm hoping is we elect Donald Trump. I believe he'll do what's right for national security rather than what this president did, trying to get some Democratic votes in Colorado.
Well, let's talk about the election, because that is really the biggest story in the country, in the world, maybe even right now. Is, you know, it's been a little over 2 weeks since that debate between Biden and Trump. I mean, objectively a disaster for the president. I mean, his own party calling for him to step aside. So I'm curious what it's been like in the halls of Congress this week. Y'all returned from the July 4th recess this week, and I mean, reporters are in a frenzy. It's not y'all's side of the aisle having the drama now. It's the other side of the aisle. But what's it been like? What's the vibe been in terms of just the frenzy of kind of uncertainty about who's going to actually be on the top of the Democratic ticket?
The dumpster fire is right in the middle of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue right now. It has spilled over to the floor of the House. Total three-ring circus in the Democratic Party. But again, what the American people are seeing right now is exactly what I saw week one when I was sworn into the United States Congress. I was one of the 20 freshmen that was requested by the president to come over to the White House week one. Myself, Katie Britt were two of the 20. When they introduced me, Todd, I will never forget this as long as I live. They said, ladies and gentlemen, Dale Strong, Congressman, 5th District of Alabama. I walk up to the president, shake his hand. He said, Dale Strong, 5th District of Alabama. And he was looking for a teleprompter to carry on a further conversation. It is sad that it took this long for the media to finally show the cognitive position of the President of the United States. And we're all paying the price throughout our country. You look at what we're dealing with from inflation, mortgage rates through the roof. You can't go to the grocery store and buy the items that you want for your family because of how much it costs. You look at the cost of gas, fuel here. I can remember the day that Donald Trump went out of office. Gas in my neighborhood gas station was $1.84. We'll double that now for all the American people, and we're all paying the price. This president had rather purchase fuel from Hugo Chavez than pump this oil out of the Gulf of Mexico or other places throughout our country. We were energy independent, but that's not what they wanted. They wanted us to buy it from other people. Can you believe we're buying oil from Hugo Chavez? Totally unacceptable. This president's cognitive state is now being exploited because it's exactly what you see. He cannot put two sentences together, and he's forgetting who his own vice president is. This is what's been going on for the entire time. But the media in Washington, D.C. has covered him every step of the way.
Yeah, that was difficult to watch. Well, look, we're out of time. That's all the time we have. But thank you for coming on. And I guess I'll see it. We're going to come up to D.C. For a series of interviews, I think in September. So I guess I'll see you then. But thanks again, Congressman.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page. You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Kim Boswell, Commissioner of the Alabama Department of Mental Health. Commissioner, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we wanted to highlight a really significant happening for your department, but for really the whole state in our history, and that is the Bryce Hospital Museum that you've opened up there in Tuscaloosa. We weren't able to actually be there for the opening because it was on a Friday, but can you talk about how it went and sort of what led to this and why it's important?
So yes, thankfully we had a great event. We had about 175 people who came to the event, and it's something that we've been working on really since 2014 when the department sold the property to the University of Alabama. The old Bryce Hospital became part of the University of Alabama, and at that time we were working with the university and knew as part of that sales agreement that we were going to build a museum of some sort. But at the time, we just could have never envisioned what it turned out to be. Old Bryce, Maine is now the Welcome Center for the University of Alabama. And so the University of Alabama spent significant funds restoring really the old Bryce Main, and kept many of the architectural features and the brick walls, the wood floors, and really did such a wonderful job restoring it really to its former glory. And then, of course, it's named after Pettis and Catherine Randall. The Randall family made significant contributions to the building of the Welcome Center. And so now students who go on the campus of the University of Alabama will walk through the same doors as the people we served. So we knew that we wanted to build a museum, but we never imagined that the university would be able to restore that building, and then our museum is on the second floor. The original stairs from 1861 are still in the building.
Wow.
So you walk up the original stairs to the second floor, and then that's where the museum is. And eventually the university is building a performing arts center on the other side of Old Bryce Main. And so the museum is actually a walk-through museum, so that'll be connected to the Performing Arts Center. And so people who are coming into the building, students who are coming to walk through the Welcome Center, patrons that are going through the Performing Arts Center will all have an opportunity to go through the museum. The day we were there, 200 people had already been through that morning, people who weren't associated with our event. So there's been a whole lot of interest. We did dedicate it to former Commissioner John Houston. He was really the person that had a vision for preserving mental health history in Alabama because it's so significant in terms of our state, our nation,
Sure.
and really internationally. So it turned out to be a great event.
You're right. There is so much history there, and you've got to preserve it. You've got to tell it all. And you're right. It's not just Alabama history. It's
Right.
national history. I'm thinking about the Wyatt case. I'm thinking
Right.
about Alabama's role in shaping mental health jurisprudence, really, for the whole country. And so
Right.
is that part of what's showcased there?
It is. We also did an interview with former Commissioner Kathy Sawyer, who was really instrumental in settling the Wyatt case. It was a 30-year, about 30 years we were in that, and I tell people all the time, you know, it's one of the longest running lawsuits in our state, and she as commissioner settled that case and was instrumental in making sure that the standards for people, for care for individuals with mental health issues as well as individuals with intellectual disabilities, the standards that were set by the Wyatt case really became what we know now as Joint Commission standards. And so it had an impact on treatment, it had an impact on rights. People had a right not to be held unless they were a danger to themselves or others. Because a lot of the way Bryce Hospital became overcrowded is we didn't have a commitment law. So anybody who decided their family member was being difficult or you know, not sure what's going on with them, they could be sent to Bryce and really be kept there for maybe some reasons that weren't the best reasons. And so once we had the commitment law, then obviously you couldn't be held and your civil rights taken away unless you were a danger to yourself or others. And so that was a big part of it. In the beginning, in 1861, when it opened, we had Peter Bryce, the first superintendent, who had gone around the United States and all around internationally working towards something called the moral treatment movement. And it was really about getting people with mental illness out of jails, free from restraint, having a very peaceful, welcoming environment for them to be in. The building itself was built with a lot of lighting so that people would feel comfortable and at peace in that building. It was also a marvel in terms of it had running water, it had electricity, it was heated and cooled to 75 degrees. And that was unheard of at the time. So it's pretty fascinating, all of the history of Bryce Hospital. I had a text yesterday from a senator that said, you know, can we come? When can we come to see Bryce? We have a group of us, we want to come see it. So there's been a lot of excitement and interest, and I'm really happy John Houston's goal was we need to know our history so that we don't repeat it. And so there are a lot of lessons learned from the Bryce history. And a lot of what you see in our crisis movement right now is a lot about not repeating those mistakes. The investment in crisis care really is the first time we've seen that kind of transformation in our department without a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I want to get to the crisis care centers, but you talk about, senators wanting to go visit, lawmakers wanting to see this. And I'm just struck by, we've talked on this show for the last couple of years about how there is a renewed interest, a renewed prioritization of mental health from the legislature, from the governor, whereas we did fall back, after the recession for some time. Do you think it's important, do you think this Bryce Museum can be instructive to talk about that history, to talk about what happens when you take your eye off the ball and the importance of mental health as we go forward?
Absolutely. We were so grateful Speaker Ledbetter was there and spoke and reiterated his commitment to mental health and to addressing the mental health issue. We had 17 members of the legislature there. So we do absolutely think that it's important. We had Chairman Reynolds, who of course chairs our work group, our mental health work group. It just demonstrates to me their commitment to the issue and their commitment to the citizens of Alabama and making sure that they have the services that they need.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, we'll talk about the crisis centers. I can't keep up. Y'all are moving so quick to set up these crisis centers around the state.
Right.
It started small, but now it's growing. Where are we in terms of how many crisis centers, where are they, and maybe your plans for the future?
I have a little trouble keeping up myself sometimes. So Huntsville, Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, Montgomery, and Mobile. So the newest one is Tuscaloosa. They opened last October. And they're in a smaller location right now. They're providing some services, but they're building a new facility. And when they move into the new facility, they'll have more bed capacity. We also have been working over the last 3 years around a rural crisis model with our community mental health center in Andalusia. It's not quite up and running yet, so we don't count it in the number of 5, but probably in the next couple of weeks you'll see a little bit of media about that because they were just notified from the USDA that they're going to get funding to build a crisis center, so they're very excited about that. We also have Spectra Care that's opening in the fall, which is the Dothan area, so we're pretty excited. So Dothan will be the 6th, and then probably soon after that, South Central, the Andalusia Brantley area will be able to open theirs. We believe we need 11 crisis centers in the state, so obviously we'll continue to work to get funding for 11 crisis centers across the state. Right now, we've served over 12,000 individuals in those crisis centers, and we were looking at a graph yesterday, and it really does show that the longer they're open, the more people they're serving. And so to hit that kind of 12,000 number was really significant for us. So we're very excited. It's working. We have a significant number of people who show up at a crisis center who are suicidal. And so it's saving lives, and we want to continue that effort. And our goal is to have access to crisis service for everyone in the state.
You mentioned suicide. Remind our audience about why the crisis centers are so important. Why would you need a crisis center in your region?
So one of the things that happened when we experienced a budget cut is we sort of shrank down our services, and you could get outpatient services, or you could have your civil rights taken away and go to one of our state facilities, and there was really nothing in between. And so oftentimes when people are in a mental health crisis, the first thing they do is dial 911.
Okay.
And if you dial 911, you get EMS or law enforcement. And if you get those two, where can they take you? To jail or the emergency department. And so the whole crisis initiative is about trying to get people to the right kind of care so that they don't wind up in jail or they don't wind up boarding in an emergency department without care. And so the 24/7 aspect of the crisis centers, that's really what's important, because when you're in that crisis, that's when you need help. Not 2 weeks later or 6 weeks later when you can get an appointment for an outpatient visit. You really need at that moment to have access to 24/7 care. And that's why it's so important. And then hopefully if you get that care, your situation doesn't deteriorate to where you wind up being a danger to yourself or others and wind up in a civil commitment. Mm-hmm. And so in some ways it's trying to decrease the number of civil commitments, but really it's about 24/7 access to care. And of course 988 is a big part of that, and trying to shift people from dialing 911 to dialing 988 so they can get crisis services, go to a crisis center, or have a mobile crisis team deployed.
Absolutely, and it's been interesting to see the folks in this building, in the State House, lawmakers talk about the importance of these things.
Yeah.
It's been a real change. While I have you, we're about to be back to school. I mean, it's July, and yet we're about to be back to school because it starts so early in August. There's been also an increased focus on mental health in schools, which I'm really glad to see.
Right.
Because we do have challenges in terms of mental health, anxiety amongst students and everything. As we get back to school, how should teachers, parents, administrators go about maybe thinking about the mental health challenges facing students as they return to school?
So we get really concerned about the youth mental health crisis, and I do think that's going to be a big topic of conversation for policymakers this year. And what we're really hearing a lot about right now is this shift for our kids from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood, where when we were kids, we would go out and play with other kids, but really once smartphones and social media came along, kids stopped doing that and really spent a significant amount of time on the phone. And so I have a reading list for parents, for legislators, legislative members. It's a new book called The Anxious Generation that really looks at what's happening with our kids and why are we seeing such an increase in anxiety and depression. And what we know is that if kids are on their phones more than 3 hours a day, they're at double the risk of anxiety and depression. The average as of the summer of 2023 for kids is 4.8 hours. So obviously we have a problem with
way
kids.
More than
And what's the harm? So what we see is social deprivation because kids are not interacting with other kids. We see sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction. Because a lot of the apps, a lot of the video games in particular are built to keep you coming back. And so just like a person with a gambling addiction winds up going back and back and back, the same thing happens with video games. So obviously it makes me a little nervous if they're having that experience, and then that eventually can lead to an addiction later on in life. And so a lot of what the book talks about is what can we do right now. So there's a set of recommendations in here that I'll certainly be talking to policymakers about. No smartphones before high school, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. Because the other weird thing that happened during that time is you had kids who were, kidnapped or taken, and so people stopped just sending their kids outside to play. And so there's just some things that happened in our culture that are having such a negative impact on kids. We know if kids are using cell phones, they're not connecting with other kids. And I think I heard someone from the Montgomery County school systems came and spoke with legislative members about taking the phones away and just the difference in the interaction between kids. Teachers were much more satisfied with their job because the kids were now paying attention. So needless to say, that is a big part of the conversation that we're going to have in the fall, is really, there's some things we can't control. You know, if kids are experiencing trauma, if kids are having adverse childhood experiences, you know, we obviously want to address that as well. But this is a pretty simple thing that we can control, and we can make decisions about how our kids are using phones, and getting them really engaged in interacting with other kids, because those are the same things that build resilience if they do experience trauma. So it's sort of a, you know, a double whammy for our kids. It's like we've got this phone thing going on where they're not connected, and then if they experience trauma on top of that, they're not connected.
Thanks so much, Commissioner, for coming on, and we'll look forward to updates as the Crisis Center build out continues.
Yeah, we're excited.
Absolutely. Thanks again. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Nancy Dennis of the Alabama Retail Association and Hunter McDonald of the Locker Room here in Montgomery. Nancy, Hunter, thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Glad to be here.
Well, we're talking about the sales tax holiday that's upcoming. This is always kind of timed for back to school, right? Parents are buying clothes and gear and all the things that are required to go back to school. And a long time ago, Alabama put a sales tax holiday in place to make those things more affordable. Nancy, can you kind of walk through that history and what items are actually on, you know, applicable to the sales tax holiday?
So this is the 19th year we've had a back-to-school sales tax holiday in the state of Alabama. It really started because the states around us had a sales tax holiday back in 2006, and retailers came to our association and said, you know, we need this in Alabama too, because people are going to other states. The people living along the Mississippi state line, the Florida state line, the Georgia state line, and the Tennessee state line were going and shopping for their back-to-school clothes in those other states. And so so we established the sales tax holiday. The legislature enacted that in 2006, and this is our 19th year. It started off in August, and it moved to July in 2017. And so the sales tax holiday for this year, it's always in the third full weekend of July. And so it will be July 19th through the 21st. It starts at 12:01 a.m. on July 19th and goes all the way through midnight on July 21st. The items that are tax-free are clothing that are $100 or less, each item. So you can buy as many $100 or less items of clothes if you want. And they'll be tax-free. And then school supplies that are $50 or less, certain school supplies. And then books that are $30 or less, textbooks that are $50 or less, and computer and computer equipment that's $750 or less.
That's interesting. I appreciate the history there, because you're right. Okay, if I'm a parent and I'm doing back to school shopping, especially if you got multiple students, you know, multiple children in school, you're going to be spending hundreds of dollars on back to school clothing. And so that, whether it's a 10% sales tax or whatever, that really makes a difference in terms of savings for back to school gear. Well, Hunter, you're a local retailer here in Montgomery. Locker Room is, you know, such an iconic establishment here in Montgomery. Do y'all see an uptick when it comes to back to school time?
Oh, absolutely. The sales tax holiday is really important for us, so much so that we coincide our summer sale with it to add advantage to the sales tax holiday. We sell a lot of khaki pants and khaki shorts, and a lot of neckties for graduating seniors that are rising seniors that are coming up. But it really makes a difference. We get a lot of people coming in and buying a lot of basic items that they need, and it doesn't hurt that we put a lot of stuff on sale too to help them out on that. But we get really starting on Friday afternoon is when we get the most traffic from it, and Saturday morning's a zoo. So it's a lot of fun. So.
I bet. Well, I'm a customer. I'm wearing the Locker Room right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Sorry for the commercial, but I mean, isn't part of this an encouragement to shop local? Look, with the emergence of online shopping, Amazon, Walmart, whatever, there's so much online shopping, but isn't part of this the importance of shopping local, to support your local retailers, to support the local jobs, the local tax base, and all that? I mean, talk about the importance of that, Hunter.
Well, you don't see an Amazon name on a Little League jersey. You see local merchants that are doing that. And whenever possible, you should buy local. And it's because you're supporting the community. You know, Amazon doesn't pay to repave the roads. They don't pay to do this and that in that regard. So we need people to shop local, to keep your local merchants in business, and also the fact that we employ a lot of people here, and the majority of people are employed not by big box retailers, they're by small independent companies, and we're constantly trying to make ourselves better, but the community as a whole needs to be in it to win, so to speak, for Montgomery retail partners.
Nancy, do you hear a lot of that from your members about, the importance of keeping it local? I mean, y'all advocate for that here in the State House, right?
We do. We advocate for that every day. Yeah. So all that money comes when you buy from a local retailer. That retailer is going to hire people. That retailer is going to do business with other local businesses. They're banking locally. All of that money is recirculating in the local economy, and so that just it's supportive of your community. To make sure that you have the schools, make sure that you have fire and police protection and all those things. That all comes with buying local, and so it's just important to your economy. And so those local businesses are really what give your community their flavor, their uniqueness. I mean, when you go to visit a city, you want to visit the local businesses, the ones that have really make a city a city. We have lots of businesses like the Locker Room that are really identifiable with the city of Montgomery.
Sure, absolutely. Have you found also? He mentioned that they're targeting sales, right? With or timing sales for the sales tax holiday. Have you heard from local establishments that they're also?
Yes, and so this is. There are a lot of retailers who sell these kinds of goods, but it's especially a big weekend for those retailers that sell those items specifically. Children's clothing stores, children's shoe stores, those kinds of things. We've got lots of stores in the state that are, especially for children's clothing, that are pre-selling. So they're letting you come and pick it out, figure out what you want, and then the transaction will happen on that weekend.
Okay.
And so you need to really, and that's what's important for consumers to really do some research before they go out there. You need to have your list, whatever the school supply list is from your local school, and then you need a list of what you need, and you want to buy, this weekend is the weekend to buy the items that are tax-free, because there's a lot of items on school supply lists that are not tax-free. Things like wipes and paper towels and things like the school supplies that are tax-free are instructional based, and so it's paper and pencils and crayons and art supplies and all those kinds of things. And so you really need to do some little research beforehand, and that includes knowing what the hours the businesses are open. It also does apply to online sales though, so you can order online and pick up in store, and as long as the transaction takes place that weekend, it is tax-free.
Do y'all have maybe a list online of items that are applicable to the sales tax holiday?
Sure, you can find that at alabamaretail.org, and Alabama Retail, all spelled out as one word, ORG, and it's also on the Alabama Revenue Department's website. So there is a list of specific items that are tax-free, but the clothing is vast. So people don't think about diapers are considered clothing, raincoats are considered clothing.
Well, yeah, you've got a selection over here of
some
items.
So diapers is a big one. So if you have children that are not in school that are in diapers, that's a great weekend to go and stock up on those kinds of things. There are other things like you don't think about that everybody uses. Printer ink is tax-free. Flash drives are tax-free. copy paper that you use in your home office is tax-free. So, you know, it's a really good idea to look at that list and look at it, and then you can really save a lot of money. And in a family of three, with 3 children, they're going to easily spend over $1,000 when you took all those things into to play, and that's, you know, that's $100 saving.
Yeah, it's a big deal. We're almost out of time, but Hunter, it sounds like this is the reason why establishments like yours and other local establishments are a part of the Retail Association, being part of an association, a trade group advocating on your behalf.
Exactly. They do so much for us without us even knowing it, and we get so much benefit being a member of their organization.
Well, look, sales tax holiday is coming up. Take advantage. We encourage everybody to take advantage. I may be seeing you over at the locker room to take advantage of those neckties and things like that. But thank you so much for coming on and encouraging our viewers to take advantage of the sales tax holiday.
Thank you very much for having us.
Glad to be here.
We'll be right back.
Alabama Public Television is your place for free professional development, curriculum-aligned videos, lesson plans, and more. Explore resources at aptv.org/education.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.